evening, everybody. It's really good to be with you again. And welcome to the Land and Housing Coalition and our 2023-2024 cohort season. We have been together now 4 months, and it is such a pleasure to be here in the collective with you. We're over 60 congregations and communities across Oregon, learning how to steward our land and our people and our money so that everybody in Oregon can find home. A reminder for those of you who haven't been with us before that we are a part of a larger movement home that we call the Sacred Organizing House. The house brings together under one roof teams of people of faith and courageous love who are committed to building a multi-faith, multiracial, and multi-generational movement for justice in Oregon. And the thing that unites us is the shared practice of sacred organizing, which we're all learning together, because we believe that by working together, we can move toward our horizon that is made of liberation and includes racial equity, housing justice, climate resilience, and youth leadership. So we are together. But tonight, we are the coalition, the Land and Housing Coalition. And just to ground us in tonight's learning, we are in the sacred organizing spiral. We continue through that spiral. In the spiral, we learn how to listen to our neighbors and ourselves and our land to reveal what needs and pressures and dreams are present there. Because when we know that, we know how to take action with integrity. So we're learning how to build collective power, to move out of isolation, and to share resources. Those resources are people, land, money, and knowledge, because we want to move aside the barriers that stop us from making the world the place that we know it's supposed to be, right? One where all people have a safe and affordable and meaningful place to live and belong. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your time and for the risk that you take by being organizers in the world to make the world different. Tonight, specifically, we are going to begin by learning about power. To act and to organize, we have to move from encountering quote unquote individual stories, which we encounter all the time, right? You all have been doing one-to-ones and relational meetings face-to-face with people. But we have to move from those individual stories into building a collective public story that moves all of us toward a shared goal. In other words, to make the change that we seek in the world. So in time, the weaving of the threads of all of those individual stories can show us what action we need to take in order to transform systems and make real change. And I was thinking about this today as we were preparing for this evening with you all. Have any of you ever noticed how we can all agree on a problem? Say, homelessness. And we can all share an interest in solving it. And yet somehow, no matter how hard we fight, nothing changes. And the reason I notice that this happens most often is because we do not understand power. We believe, and I've been guilty of this myself, we believe that if we think the right things and we tell the right people what we think, that they will just make change happen. Has anybody ever experienced that? Yeah, Ron, I'm seeing Ron's hand immediately. But in the background or all around us, there is power moving that we don't understand. Or I would say a different way, that we haven't taken the time to analyze because we can understand it. So I want you to picture in your mind a big boulder, like the biggest boulder that you could possibly fit in your yard. And I want you to imagine that you want to move that boulder from point A to point B. Now, one way that you could do it is to just try to push it, like maybe put your shoulder into it and push it alone. Another way would be to get a bunch of people together to move it, which isn't a bad idea, right? That is one way to move that boulder. But a third way is through leverage. And if you know anything about physics, you know that with leverage, just a few people or even one person who understands how power works can move that very large boulder with just a small lever at exactly the right point. So we have to understand where power lives and how to move things using it. Another problem that I know that I've run into is even when we know that power is at work in the world, we're afraid of it. We don't want to use power badly. This is certainly true for me. I don't want to be one of the ones who uses power in a domineering way or a dominating way. And so I avoid it altogether. And I remember when I first started organizing, I really struggled with the idea of power because I thought that I'd only ever seen it used by people and systems in a bad way. Power over, as we call it. But then I realized that I have power too, and so do my loved ones, and so do my neighbors, so do all of us. And that we actually, on a day to day basis, make things happen through connection and love. And so that's also power. But I didn't know that it counted. I thought we had to call it something else. It was just power among instead of power over. So, all of that is to say, tonight we're going to apply that thinking to our organizing and to our communities. We're going to learn how to talk about power in new ways, how to see and map that power, yours and the systems that press in on us, so that we can be wise about using it. And I promise this, we'll learn some easy practices for untangling how it's working around us so that we can actually take some wise and meaningful action that will make real change that matters in the world. So I'm really excited for you all to be here. And I want to invite Joel to introduce himself and then lead us in our spiritual grounding. Thanks so much, Joel, for being willing to do that for us.
Thanks, Jules. And good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you tonight. My name is Joel Rothy. My pronouns are he and him, and I serve as pastor with Resurrection Lutheran Church in East Portland. This is our first year with a core team in the cohort. Notice that word that I used in my introduction, with. I've learned to use that word over time intentionally and meaningfully as I define my role and my relationship with the community that I serve. I'm not just a pastor of or a pastor at, but with the people who I've been called to serve alongside and among. When we truly see ourselves as with and among our neighbors and the diversity of people who make our community, we can see an experience of power emerge that is different from the many ways that power is often experienced as being used over. I grew up in the west part of the Portland metro area, upon the land and traditional territory of the Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, Kalapuya, Aftalati, Grand Round, and Siletz peoples. I didn't even come to know who had been displaced from the land that I grew up upon until I was an adult, many years after I left behind the creek and the woods and the neighborhood that formed me. And that's just one of the many ways that I have been blind to how power was used over other peoples and the land itself. Growing up, I had little need to think about power on a day-to-day basis. Power that was expressed through land, money, relationships, government, and policy was often in my favor, and it was taken for granted. I did not know growing up stories or experiences in relationship with people for whom they had to work and organize and fight against systems that were not working for their own self-interests. But that is changing for me and has been for some time. As a seminary student and pastor, I've walked alongside a diversity of people from backgrounds that have taught me both the difficulties of navigating how power is expressed over them in their communities, but also to appreciate the resilience and capacity that comes when communities relate and organize and express their self-interest through building power with and among. Just over 2 weeks ago, I was offered the opportunity to sit at a table and eat halakas, a traditional Venezuelan holiday dish, while hearing the story of a young adult who had made the journey as an asylum seeker from Venezuela through 8 different countries before arriving here in Portland. He shared about the difficulties of not being able to work or generate income and of experiencing living on the street for 2 months. He talked about having professional qualifications that he was trained in his home country, but not being able to use them here. He talked about caring deeply for his people and his community who he was organizing with and who were there with him that day, to be able to streamline access to housing and work for other recent arrival asylum seekers and their families. He said that they just wanted an opportunity to learn a living, have access to resources and housing, and find meaning in their lives. His passion was palatable, and it was heard in his voice and his emotion as he not only talked about these realities and hopes, but expressed deeply who he is and who his community is. But on the other side of the table, the person who he was sharing the story with was not just me. Is Oregon State Representative Wah Win from the 48th District, the district that I live in, and which the congregation that I serve with is located in. Representative Win was able to find common ground in his story and share her own story of being a second-generation immigrant from Vietnam, knowing the struggles her parents had been up against herself. This, I believe, is some of the power held in sacred organizing, not to hold power over others, but to build power from within and among through sacred encounters and sometimes with people that have power, hearing stories, building relationships, and working together, increasing awareness and creating coalitions of people who can create a different future together. This was just one example of how stories being shared and relationships being formed can lead to an experience of power with. We can learn about the self-interest of someone else who has experienced power and privilege from a different lens, and where we can intersect with people and systems that can influence and change access to relationships, housing, money, and policy for the well-being of everyone. This kind of power with is what we are called to participate in and work to create, in order to address ways that power over is continuing to hurt the lives of others. And so as we move forward today in our training, let's take a moment to reflect on a time where maybe you experienced power with. Who have been the people that you have been engaged with, and what allowed that experience of power with to emerge? How did you experience that power? As you reflect on this throughout the evening, I'll pass the mic over to Stori to be able to lead us through a reflection practice around the narratives we tell ourselves around power.
Thank you, Joel. And that lends itself very lovely to this reflection and this grounding. As Joel said, my name's Stori Long. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with Storyline Community, and I companion the Oak Grove core team in Clackamas County. And right now we're going to do a little bit of embodied grounding in some of those stories about power, how we carry it in our histories, in our past, and in our bodies, because stories of power don't usually live in our heads. We experience them in all parts of who we are. So we are going to gently move towards some of those stories. So I invite you to start with, you can turn off your screens if you would like to, but I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath with me. We're going to do a little time travel exercise together to help identify some of those narratives around power that we might still be carrying with us into this room today that influence how we see and experience power. So start by grounding in a space where you grew up. It can be a school, it can be a sports team, a church, your home, a friend's home. Just pick one spot and settle there. And paint a picture in your mind. Take a moment to remember the people with you, the people who had authority over you, and maybe the people you had authority over. The people who were listened to in those rooms, and the people who were not. Take a moment and let that picture grow. Now, I want you to take the next minute and a half. I'll call you back whenever we're ready to just meditate or to journal. If you have something close by, you can type it up on your computer, just to think about one of the following questions or more if they come very easily. The first is, how did you see power play out in the context around you as a child? And then the second is to situate yourself in that power. Did you grow up with a strong sense of your own voice? Did you feel like you had a lot of power or not enough? And third, what was taught or modeled for you about power in those rooms? So you can take a few moments to meditate on that, and then I will gather us back together. All right, you can continue to linger in those questions if you would like. But now as we come back together, I invite you once again to take a deep breath with me. And roll out your neck, your shoulders. And now I want you to kind of take those answers from your head and into your body as you consider your relationship to power. What do you feel in your body when that word comes up? What did you feel in your body as you did that time travel exercise? Do you feel something on your skin or in your neck or your jaw, maybe your chest? How do you know in your body when you're feeling powerless? Where does that show up? Is it in your breathing? In the way you stand? In your shoulders, maybe? Where do you feel powerlessness in your body? And that same question for when you feel powerful. How do you know and experience power in your body? How do you breathe when you feel powerful? How do you stand when you feel powerful? Now take one more deep breath with me. And I thank you all for engaging in a small way in the bodily stories of power that you might carry. And now I'm going to pass the time over to Ron, who's going to teach us a little bit more about power.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you this evening. Great to see some familiar faces this new year. My name is Ron Werner, and I am the director, thanks, Joel, with Together Lab and a partner of the Levin Community Land and Housing Coalition. I care about housing because there are people in my life who are housing insecure as a result of family changes. And so navigating systems and changing where power lies is very, very important to me. We're going to start off this section on power with a movie. It's actually just a short video, about 6 minutes long. And it's an experience that I was a part of as an organizer 5 years ago, telling the story of when 124 asylum seekers were transferred to a federal prison here outside of McMinnville in the tiny town of Sheridan. And what I would invite you to watch this short video with the lens of looking at where you see power showing up in this story. Power over, power among, power with. Where do you see power showing up?
There's a belief that rural America is a white conservative monolith, and it just isn't true.
I
I think that they did that intentionally, thinking that the communities would not pay attention. When we found out about the men being imprisoned, we couldn't turn a blind eye to this.
Sheridan is a smaller prison in a small town in rural Oregon.
The original immigrant detention facilities were all full, and so they needed to find a new space.
It was unprecedented, I would say, at that time for the government to use federal prisons, which are designed for criminal detention, for immigrant detention. Seeking asylum is not a crime.
They were Sikhs, many of them. Many of them were Hindus. Some of them were from Nepal. Some were from Mexico, from Brazil, all different countries.
The Trump administration was retaining 124 people without access to attorneys. That is unlawful, period, full stop.
I did not know if there was hope for them, but all I knew was I need to help.
We immediately rallied outside of the prison.
The goal was to have the men, they were all men inside, released into the care of the community to pursue their asylum cases.
We certainly believed it was possible, even though we hadn't seen it done before.
We took local knowledge and partnered it with seasoned organizing of other organizations.
At first it was small local vigils and rallies to create local awareness, and then they turned into these very large weekly interfaith vigils outside of FCI Sheridan.
You know, at first we thought maybe we'll get like 200 people to show up. I believe that vigil had 16 to 1,700 people show up from across the state of Oregon.
Folks were traveling in from the gorge and from over the mountains. Folks were coming from the coast and down the Willamette Valley.
I remember talking to my friend Gurpreet from the Sikh Center of Oregon and said, the people on the inside are your people. Would you be willing to come and lead the prayers of our Christian service? And she said yes.
The Sikh community was providing langar for everyone. Langar is a big, huge part of the Sikh faith. You can't eat and know that your neighbor is hungry. You gotta share what you have. The first time we made langar for 700 people and we fell short, and then we brought pizzas.
That was what became a regular series of vigils where people from all different faith traditions, Jews and Buddhists and Muslims and Protestant and evangelicals, all began to take turns leading out of the depths of their traditions.
It was incredibly powerful to be over the lawn of this park and like up on a hill with the prison in the background, and to hear people singing and praying in multiple languages.
The way that Oregon responded was remarkable.
The words kept spreading throughout the state.
All these pieces were parts of this big machinery that was working towards the release.
Everyone at Sheridan was entitled to access an attorney to help him prepare for what's called a credible fear interview. And the credible fear interview is where he gets to make a showing that he has a credible fear of persecution and then has the opportunity to be released. Without the community response, we couldn't have gotten as many lawyers in there.
I mean, there were many actions over the course of a season, and they were everything from delivering petitions to interfaith vigils to 3 acts of escalating civil disobedience outside of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement building. We held worship services in the streets. We proclaimed from the depths of our tradition, our rituals, our scriptures, and called for our people to be let go.
The tipping point was when the men were passing their credible fear screenings.
7 men who were all from India were released on the same day.
We were so excited, like, all right, this is possible, we're gonna do this.
It was a very, very emotional day. We all hugged and cried.
It gave us hope that us putting public pressure on our judicial system was working.
In the end, Every single one of the men at Sheridan got out of expedited removal into asylum proceedings.
It was the result of communities coming together. When the communities come together, we can work wonders.
This experience really showed us the power in rural and urban communities working together.
One of our organizing commitments has become, how do we breathe life into every single step and not just hold our breath until there's a victory?
I think the organizing at Sheridan has created systems that have both immediate impact and then also long-term. We've seen, like with the movement for Black Lives, how there's such incredible energy and momentum in this moment. So much of that is coming out of centuries of Black-led organizing, and so we really believe in how are we building this infrastructure over decades. It allows us to respond quickly in a moment.
Oregon is not alone in being able to respond the way that it did, and so I think other communities can look at Sheridan as a light in the darkness.
There is this common feeling of love and compassion and sympathy that exists in all of us.
Organizing is not only working to get to an end goal, but it is living what we are working towards now in this moment.
Thank you for watching. It's a little emotional for me to revisit that moment. All 124 men were released into the care of the community to go through the asylum process and not have to do it from a jail cell. I got to witness the power of organizing, of people among working. And so I'm curious, everyone, please, I would love to hear a few voices come off mute and share, but also others in the chat. Where did you see power in this story? Let's do some unveiling. Where did power live in this story? Yes, in the unity of the community. Debbie and Jennifer sharing about collective foundations and practices of faith, different faiths coming together. Power in the collective. No individual was more important than any other. Common vision and the strength of diversity from Diana. Yeah, David, I'm curious if you might come off mute. New movement combined with seasoned organizing. Share, what are you seeing there?
Well, I was paraphrasing what I heard. Just that notion that folks that were coming together, they weren't alone. They found other folks around them, organizations who had been doing this practice for a while. And reminds me of the other thing she said, which was, when we do this, we're able to respond quickly because we've been practicing it. It's not like, oh gosh, we got to react to something now, so we have to get our act together. They've been cultivating those practices over time. So,
yeah, thank you so much. Where do we see, Marianne, you name the federal asylum processes. Where are you seeing power in this story in the federal asylum processes?
Well, I think we need to acknowledge that there would be other ways that our country could accept people seeking asylum that we are not so onerous. That the process of seeking asylum, even if you aren't put in a federal prison, is a very onerous process, without a lot of supports in place. So I think the government systems in place around immigration and asylum seekers hold power over people's lives.
Yeah. Who are some of those institutions? You named the government. Who else has power in this situation? Over
pardon?
Who else has power in this situation over people's lives?
People who own businesses who aren't willing to hire people who have no way to make a living while they're waiting for processes that take years. I think there's a system in place of fear of immigrants and asylum seekers that communities don't welcome them.
Yeah.
You know, people aren't willing to rent to them. You know, I think there's a lot of barriers to coming here and going through this process that could be changed with attitude changes and system changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I also saw in the video a couple of really specific pieces of the government. They talked about this policy from the Trump administration. So we have like a name and a person, but it's very easy to blame everything on Trump. So we've got to continue to peel back the layers of this. We heard immigration and customs enforcement as a site. And as part of our research actions and learning, who has power over to change this, to release the people? We learned that the regional acting director of immigration and customs enforcement was a woman named Elizabeth Godfrey, who was a Obama appointee to that office and whose family were immigration lawyers. And yet she found herself in the power position, fulfilling the policies of the Trump administration, and had power over whether or not these men would stay in prison. And so we were able to move from unveiling this complete broken system, which can make you just feel hopeless, to a Trump administration, to immigration and customs enforcement, to a name, Elizabeth Godfrey, to then beginning to unveil, well, what does she care about? Who is she? And we demand that you meet with us because we want to know what is her interest? How do we get her to a yes? Yeah, absolutely. Many of you are naming the power among that was woven in this case. I'm looking here. People acting from different faith perspectives was powerful. Positive expressions of power via resettlement agencies engaging in trauma-informed asylee, refugee, immigrant services. Nourishing one another in faith and in food so that the action could remain sustainable. Yeah, I love my colleague Hannah naming at the end, we have to practice now what we want to see in the future. And so having the sick community share their food with us, that wove power amongst us and nourished us in a different way. There's another comment here early on. Allison grabs the quote. We, of course, believed it was possible, even though we had never seen it done before. I'm curious for you all, what does a quote like that bring up? We, of course, believed it was possible, even though we had never seen it done before. Faith? Risk, faith, yeah. Hope, Shaniya, thank you. Beth, I'm wondering if you might be willing to come off mute and share a little bit more about the faith piece.
Well, I just feel like if you just have this idea that there is a better way, and if people come together to make something work. I mean, you have a faith in the process, but you also have your faith. I have my faith that I'm grounded in, and so that brings me hope and motivation to move forward and keep thinking positively. And I think I get energy when I'm around other people. I mean, just watching this film was very emotional because you could just see like the positivity and the crescendo. It was like you knew from the beginning that there was going to be a success. Maybe it was the music of the video, but yeah, I mean, I feel like faith and hope really kind of lend themselves well to organizing and vice versa.
Yeah, thank you so much. It reminds me even what you were sharing earlier too, Marianne, of, these systems are set up in some ways to fail. They're not working. They are broken. And, faith leads me to, yes, believe in what Martin Luther King said, who will celebrate this month, that the arc of the moral universe is long, But I also love how Cornell West adds, and we have to, or the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And yes, as Cornell West reminds us and other Black leaders today, that we have to do the bending. That oftentimes it doesn't just happen on its own, that the power among can be a part of the bending. And if you've ever had to bend something or work on a construction project, or have you ever tried to, like, you know, you got a piece of scrap wood that you're trying to break real quick and put inside of your compost or whatever. Sometimes you need multiple people to like leverage that bend, and that's a part of this power among too. So we intentionally look for other people who have a shared interest or a self-interest in this. We built incredible relationships with the Sikh community because we knew that it was in their interest. Many of them were connected to family members back home in India, and many of the men were fleeing political persecution from an increasingly Hindu nationalist government in India. We wondered, you know, what's amazing to me is how we were able to get, and this video highlighted 5 different organizations' perspectives, but you know, nonprofits are oftentimes set up to compete against each other for resources and relationships and people, and yet we were able to work through all of that because of shared interest, and it built a more powerful coalition of, like you said, David, local knowledge and seasoned organizing, but also the brilliance of lawyers whom we got to know in a completely different way and build this power among. Yeah. I want to invite you all to begin to think, and as you begin to do that, I want to spotlight and invite my old friend Diana White from First United Methodist to be spotlighted. And I'm going to ask her a couple of questions, but you know, I'm curious for you all in your teams and in your context, in the encounters that you've had in the beginnings of Unveiling and Action and Pause, where are you seeing power lie in your own communities? How is that showing up? And so I want to ask you, Diana, you know, maybe tell us a little bit about what are you seeing, what are you hearing in your community? And then I would love to hear a little bit about how is power showing up?
Power is such an interesting concept, and I'm kind of with Jules that the idea of having power is not anything that was ever in my radar until we started doing this sacred organizing. So this is, I think, our 3rd or 4th year in the cohort. We came through Emerge and Sacred Circles, and we have a core team, or had one, of about 9 or 10 people, and we're real engaged and did house meetings and relationships and one-on-one, and was very enthusiastic. And we also were able to get a feasibility study funded and done, exploring whether to build housing on our property. And that was an interesting process. We found out, yes, it is feasible, but in the process, we have a large congregation. People started paying attention and started saying, wait a minute, I'm not sure we want to do that. And so our core team now is doubled in size. There are a lot of people who are curious and interested, and we have no quite shared vision yet. So we are kind of back to the sacred encounters and expanding our area. We are finding people to partner with. We are sponsoring forums, and we co-sponsored one with our church library, and pulled in street books and had a presentation by them. And we are partnering with Path Home, which was a homeless shelter that grew out of our basement and now has a space of their own and are growing and are quite successful.
Diana, I'm gonna pause you there real quick because you named some really helpful things along the way that I'm wondering if the whole we
Yeah.
can just name together so we can build up a little bit of muscle of highlighting where does power show up, not just in videos with great soundtracks that already have an end result, but in active projects like yours. So I'm curious for friends in the chat, where did you see in what Diana just shared power over? Where are you hearing it in that story of them looking to build housing on their land? Where are the places where power over exists?
And while people are thinking, I will just add that
Yeah.
after we did the feasibility study and the listening sessions, we did conclude that we still don't know enough, that we need to be on this journey and expand the journey. And that's one reason we're doing the forums. We've got a group called Community Connections to reach out to get to know our neighbors better. Creating that power among. And some of the skeptics are engaged with us and are very curious. So I'm seeing power among is just in some ways even more diffuse. We don't, whether, at one point, it's not a linear process by any means. So at one point,
It'd be a lot easier if it was.
Yeah, we were going this way, and now, well, we might go these ways. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and we're just in that process.
Yeah. Some of the folks in the chat have named neighbors who showed up and side-eyed their pursuits. There's also some power over just in the feasibility study process and who gets to have power, decide what
Right.
is buildable or not buildable on that land. There are power in our planning and sustainability bureaus and banks and all sorts of institutions like that as well. So I don't want to forget them along the way. But I love that you all, as a reaction to maybe some of the neighbors' concerns or even the concerns of people in your own community.
And I will say it wasn't neighbors' concern. We're talking about within our own.
Oh, even just within. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that your approach to that is to figure out, wow, how do we bring them in? How do we unveil their self-interest or get to better understand their fears? Not because we're ever going to have all of the answers about how to build the perfect affordable housing or fixing a broken asylum system, but because we believe there is a way that we can find enough shared interest to collectively act. So really,
and that's a point. We don't know what that collective action will be.
Yeah.
But I think we are all committed that there will be some meaningful collective action.
Beautiful.
And so that's where we are now. And we're really expanding our network, and it's great, but it's slow.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Diana, and thank you for all of the iterations that I've gotten to know and evolutions of this team over the years. I'm so grateful because what I've seen in your team is the power of relationship. It may have started as a particular issue or through a particular program, but you have followed those relationships and the listening into where you are now, and it's going to be really powerful. Thank you, and thank you all for having me this evening. I'm going to pass it over to Jules, who is going to get us into some one-to-ones.
You are going to have 12 minutes to answer the following questions in your conversation and to deeply listen to each other as the other person shares as well. Where are you right now in your own team's work and organizing? Where are you seeing systems that use power over showing up? Where are you seeing power over showing up? Ron named the banking system and government and all sorts of other power over systems that were impacting what was happening at Sheridan and also with Diana's team at First UMC. But you're seeing your own in your own spaces, and they could be smaller systems or bigger systems. So that's the first question to explore. The second question is, where are you seeing possibilities to build power among? Where are you seeing those seeds of power among? So we'll send you out into your one-to-ones. You'll have 12 minutes and you'll get a 1-minute warning. So watch your screen for that as you're having your conversation, and we'll bring you back. All right, welcome back. So we've had some stories from Joel and Diana about like personal and core team power dynamics, power over, power among, where those things have shown up for them. We saw from Ron some big power over and power among examples with the detention at Sheridan actions and the work that was done there. And you all are seeing them happen in your own spaces. So perhaps you noticed some in your conversation with yourself when Stori invited you to reflect on your background. And maybe you heard some in the conversation in your one-to-one. So I want to ask you this question as we do some debrief together this evening about what we're learning. I'm going to put this in the chat for you. And feel free to pop up either in the chat or just speak up and unmute yourself. Where in your various learnings tonight, your conversations, your stories, are you seeing systems that use power over faces? Yeah, John, what are you seeing in your space?
Well, we're waiting for the next penny to drop about Barbie's Village. We have a core meeting this Sunday, and we've gone through a whole phase. This fall was kind of devoted to the power over the situation on the part of the presbytery, and they still retain some they're pretty committed in a way they can't back out of. Transferring the property to the Barbie's Village and the Future Generations Collaborative. And so that's one thing to be on our radar. The other is well, you're going to get onto the power with, and our power with is with the indigenous community that will be taking hold there.
That's great.
Anyway, that's a couple
Thanks,
things I can
thanks
say.
for jumping ahead to power with. Actually, I think we need to hear that. And what I'm hearing around power over is certainly denominational systems like the presbytery have power over through, and the way they're able to exert it is through land wealth, through policies and procedures that they get to write and other people have to observe. Though in the presbytery, it's also a power of the people sort of design. And so there is some power from the ground up as well, right?
Well, yeah, we got like an 80-some% vote for the transfer. But we know that there is going to be some back talk, there's going to be some reaction among those that feel like they've lost their control. And we've managed to take their control away right now by getting that an 80+% vote.
And how did you do that, John? How did you get that to happen?
When you say you're referring to,
I mean, the
yourself
team and the whole group. Yeah.
Yourself and the folks in this meeting right here who got mobilized to help with phone calls and other things in advance of that meeting back in November.
Yeah.
And
so I think what I'm hearing you say is really important for all of us to remember, that we can take the very thing that is exerting power over us and transform and transmute it into power among. So the presbytery itself is made of people, and this crew of organizers and volunteers across the community who feel passionately about Barbie's Village took what could have been just no's over and over again, and you need to follow the rules. We don't do it that way. We've never seen that happen. And through relationship, turned it into an 80% yes vote, and also turned an entire neighborhood, because Laurelhurst neighborhood also was transformed through this. So it's you're given great examples of how to do both pieces. Thanks, John. I'm seeing too in the chat folks who are talking about Multnomah County, the governmental piece. That Jennifer, I'm seeing your comment, and the allocation of funding. Can you say a little bit about what you're seeing happen there and why you're labeling it power over?
Well, yeah, I'm going to speak really specifically to the context of St. Andrews, but we had partnered with We Shine PDX to host a tiny home village in the church parking lot. And with encouragement from Multnomah County, we then waited months and months and months for the county to make decisions about where it was going to allocate its funding for alternative shelters. And we would read in the news that, you know, there's X million number of dollars of newly available for housing that the county has to allocate. And then we would continue to not hear from them. And so I'm not sure what's going on there and where the structures are, but it felt like, I mean, there is some power over, positive or negative. The county is deciding how to allocate those funds on which sort of housing projects.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I've seen Multnomah County operate in not just your project, but other faith communities organizing around housing in Multnomah County, and I'm sure this works this way in every county, friends, and in all places, is through a lack of transparency or making things so hard to understand that you feel like you cannot make a difference because you can't even get into where are we supposed to go to change something? Who are we supposed to become in new relationship with in order to even ask the right questions or to move something in a new direction? So there's some tactics of power over that are some of those showing up or have shown up?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your experience of power among, Jennifer?
I mean, even at the county level, power among, Commissioner Jayapal is on the county, was on the Board of Commissioners, and she's been really open to listening about our project and coming out to see it. We have made community partners with with neighbors, with other congregations, with nonprofits in the area, and they've all been advocating with us to the county to get the funding.
Yeah. And I saw in the chat, you also noticed people who are housed have power, and it can be used as power over or as power among. And I'm glad you named that because it depends on, what does it depend on? It depends on relationship, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how we build that. So thanks for naming that. And yay for St. Andrews, whose work is
funding is here.
Off. Woohoo! Yeah. Everybody can celebrate that they got funding for their tiny home through organizing. All right, a second question. So we've had a bunch of stories and teachings tonight. I want you to think about, what do we need to remember as we're organizing about keeping power among strong over the long run? How do we keep power among strong and nurture it over the long run? What are you either seeing in your places or have learned over time? Oh, thanks, Allison. Yes, a regular practice of sacred encounters. A regular practice. So that means not just one-to-one, it means building a relationship over time, right? Trust, the ability to be in conflict together, the ability to say things that maybe, you know, to explore things that might not be so easy to name. And Beth agrees, nurturing relationships. Yeah, Debbie, thanks for naming shared self-interest. To continually go back. We learned about self-interest a couple gatherings ago. Self-interest changes. Remember, we had that conversation. People one day are in one place and then a part of their brain or their heart gets triggered another place and another day for another reason, and they move. We all are complicated and multifaceted. So to continually attend to, what is the self-interest of this person or this group right now? What has changed for them or might change for them? What can we change for them so that that relationship and the power among can be nurtured over a long period of time? Because you heard with the Sheridan action, this is a work really, when we give credit where credit is due, to decades and decades of relationship building. in the end. So keeping conversations and listening going with those who disagree with us. Nancy, thank you for naming that it's not just building relationship over the long run with people who are already with us or we are already with, but to, as Diana said, expand the circle and spend the time necessary to fold people in and give them the opportunity to share what their interest is in it and to turn and influence one another. All right, good. A final question, and then we're going to turn to the next piece. What new thinking about power, here, I'm going to put this in the chat. If somebody could interpret that into Spanish, that would be helpful. What new thinking about power has come up for you tonight that you didn't have before 6:30 p.m. or got triggered for you in the course of some of your conversations with one another? What perhaps has changed for you all about how you define it? I admitted at the beginning of the meeting that I needed to change my definition based on work I had done. And when I started organizing, like what's changed for you all perhaps? Debbie says it's a constant push through the idea that power is negative. Yeah. So it's not even like, oh, now I'm illuminated and enlightened. It's like, I'm going to have to work on this, this thing that lives in me, the idea that power is bad. It's over and over again, something to visit. Yeah. Aaron's saying the reminder that power over can be turned on its head. Yeah, so that reversal, we can actually take power over. And I mean, many of the people in this room are people of faith. We believe in transformation, right? That is the work of organizing, is transformation. So thanks for that reminder, Aaron. That's helpful. Oh, that it looks so different at each moment. Nancy, can you pop up and say what you mean by that?
I think it has to do with a constant changing in myself, a constant changing in the other person, and a constant changing in the relationship that we have between us.
Oh, so what I'm hearing in that is allowing the relationship to evolve and allowing each person or group in it to also evolve. It's like nobody is permanently one way. And so you have to be ready for that. Is that what you're saying?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's wonderful. The opposition, David says, of power over and power among is thought-provoking. David, I would love to know what that provokes for you. What does that bring up for you?
Well, the experience that John described earlier of our cohort struggling to get the presbytery to donate the land of the Laurelhurst Presbyterian Church to Future Generations Collaborative gave us a perfect example of people trying to exercise power over, but also, as John explained, power among. And I think that juxtaposition to me is really important. And people who are used to exercising power over rarely give it up easily, and will often try to find ways around the decisions that they don't like. And I think that's what we're struggling against right now, is a tendency to a kind of rearguard action on the part of the purveyors of power over to, in some sense, take some modicum of control over the process by which Barbie's Village is constructed.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say, like, they don't want to give up power over. And I'm thinking, what would it be like if those of us who have decided not to participate in power over, but instead power among, also refuse to give up that power among, right? Like, fought as hard for power among as the power over folks fight for that, right? Their control.
Yeah.
I think we can, I'm hesitant to say that we should adopt tactics that are shared by power over folk. However, I think that the commitment to it is really something that we can learn because we give up so easily sometimes.
I think we have to have the tenacity similar to what they display.
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay to take that model of tenacity. Thanks, David. That's really helpful. Anna's saying power over always feels more unovercomable when it is amorphous and faceless behemoth. Wow, you are testing my vocabulary tonight. Anna. We gain power when we get close enough to name names, when we see specific human faces. I think that's absolute. Thank you for that. We saw that in Ron's story in particular, that power over can feel like a huge wall that we can't climb through or over, right? Until we see people and we see faces and we know names and we see stories and we begin to understand. And that takes the risk of approach. That takes the risk of approach. So thanks for naming the amorphous, faceless behemoth. That's the name of this organizing year's work, is to know and name and have a face. Good. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments about changes in how you're thinking about power right now? Or even like pushback, questions, itchiness. Jennifer says we can build on the power of knowing names by caring and by being curious about those people. Curiosity, I notice, is one of the fundamental differences between power over and power among. Power over almost never exhibits curiosity. As long as we're practicing curiosity, we are probably on the side of power among when we're thinking about power. So how do we make sure that curiosity is a core practice to keep ourselves human, frankly? I don't know about you, but I sometimes have to struggle with my own humanity and keeping it when I'm facing something that is so overwhelming, right? Thanks for that, Jennifer. Anybody else have a thing they're working on here or question? All right, I'm gonna free us up to go into next steps because we're nearly to the end. Shaniya is gonna tell us what's coming this month and in March. So Shaniya, I wanna invite you to share with us where we're headed.
Thank you, Jules. As you said, my name is Shaniya Berry. I use she, her pronouns, and I am working with the St. Andrew's Episcopal Church as a fellow. So, to get into it, our next month's meeting will be on February 1st. And, one second. It will be from 6:30 to 8:30, just like this one, and it will be at the same link. We'll be learning about building power through our house meetings. The homework for this month is to attend any gathering. If you're within a community or committee you sit on, a public meeting with elected officials, any meetings where you can observe power dynamics and complete this unveiling worksheet or the mapping power worksheet. Jules will send this out to Jules will send this out to us through our emails. And to those who are registered, there will also be linked in the chat. You should see it now. After you complete the worksheet, take some time to reflect on what the exercise brought up for you about power and how you experience it. This is a great opportunity to put power into praxis, what Ron taught us about in his video, and talk to us about it. Don't forget to keep working on your land stories. They're very important. Work with your companion. If you get stuck, we can help. I'm one of the companions. I've done a land story. I'm doing a land story on my house. It's very interesting. Don't feel scared to dig deep. It's a fun thing. Okay. We are also having a mass assembly on March 10th. This will be an opportunity to feel our power together, to celebrate the stories of this year's organizing, and to be in person, which is great because you don't have this whole Zoom disconnect. The exact time and date of the location is still being worked out at this time, but as far as we know, it should be in the afternoon within the Portland metro area. So if you're within the metro area, it shouldn't be too far. if traffic isn't too bad. You know how bad it gets out here. Last year we gathered and there were over 400 people, and we started a campaign to move the power of land, people, and money across Oregon. Let's do it again this year. I know we can do it. All right, that's all I've got. I'm gonna move it back to Jules.
Thanks, Shaniya. I cannot say enough about how excited I am to gather with y'all in person. So I hope you'll put March 10th on your calendar. Next month, as Shaniya said, we'll be gathering same bat time, same bat station for this gathering, and we'll talk about house meetings. You all are talking right now about how to build power and what power looks like when we weave our stories together. House meetings are one of the most powerful tools we have in our toolbox as organizers to do some of that work. So I hope that we'll see you next month. And for those of you who have questions or need something, Lavita and I and the rest of the teaching team will stick around to do some evaluation. You're happy to, you're able to join us if you want to, and we would invite that. But otherwise, have a good Thursday night and a wonderful weekend.